Children, if you're headed out the door to Children's Church, you're welcome to go ahead and head out. If you're going to stay in here with us, we're glad to have you here as well. We're going to be in Job chapter 28. It's been a little while since we were in Job with different things that have been going on, but we're going to be back in Job chapter 28 today. Before I jump into that, I do want to say thank you for your prayers for the Youth Abide retreat that went on last weekend. It was a great opportunity there to connect with, I think it was 26 teenagers who was there, and a great team of workers who were there as well. I loved seeing the team of people pouring their lives into those teenagers. I loved seeing the response from those teenagers and their desire to know more about God, to connect with the people who were there, their desire to love Him, to pursue godliness. It was encouraging to me. I enjoyed immensely singing with them as well. We sang a song that we'll actually do in about a month at our Youth Sunday that the youth's going to help us lead. And I enjoyed hearing them sing it a couple times, and hearing them by themselves, my heart was blessed. I am sure that that will be a blessing to you as well when we sing that together. We all want to make sense of the world around us, don't we? Like, how much of our energy is spent looking at circumstances, looking at things that happen, looking at ideas we might have, plans we might have, dreams we might have, sufferings we go through, things people do around us. We see this whole huge list of things, and we spend a whole lot of energy trying to figure out how to make it make sense. When our team loses the game, we try to figure out why, even though you had nothing to do with it, and I had nothing to do with it. But after Tennessee football loses terribly, we'll still talk about, well, the safety's this, and the running game this, and we didn't have anything to do with it. But we're just wired to try and figure it out. When the game goes well, we try and figure out why they won. We always want some system of understanding. Something that of coherence, where you say, like, this stuff all fits together in some way. It might be motivated by different things. Sometimes we want to feel safe. And I feel safer if I can figure it out. Sometimes I think it just scratches our itch for understanding. We go, it's just nice to know how something works. Sometimes we go through sufferings and we want something that will explain the suffering. We want something where we can make sense of it. We go, these sufferings fit into my perspective this way. And I think if we're honest, probably one of the big reasons we really want to figure out why is because we want some way to control what happens in the future. As the story of Job has unfolded, that's what Job and his friends are chasing. Here they are, Job sitting in his suffering, Job's friends sitting, trying to help him. That's what they think they're doing, by the way. Trying to help him, and they're trying to figure out, how does this make sense? And what we have from the beginning of the book is we know they were wrong. Because we have the challenge, and just to remind us where we're coming from, the beginning of this book is God delighting in Job. This book starts with God saying, have you seen how great Job is? He follows me and he loves me. And Satan challenges him and says, basically, it's wrong for you to make the righteous prosper because that would corrupt their motives. I was talking with someone a couple weeks ago, and they said, that just feels like such a strange thing for Satan to accuse God of. I think it does, but if you put this picture in your mind, maybe this will help. If you saw a parent who always got their child to obey, be kind, and respectful by bribing them. Okay, we can have parenting conversations later, but let's just imagine. You see those people, right? And you go, every time that child needs to do something, it's, well, if you'll do this, I'll give you ice cream later. If I were to do that, if you'll be respectful to your mom, I'll pay you later. You'd be like, I don't think that's really good. Why? Because I'm actually corrupting a motive. Not because it's bad for me to give ice cream to my children, but because if I'm giving them ice cream because if they only do good because I'm going to give them ice cream, then their motives are, at least potentially, messed up. And for sure, we don't look at that like that's ideal parenting. That's really what Satan's accusing God of. God, you allow only prosperity for the righteous. You are bribing their obedience so that they love the ice cream more than they love you. That's Satan's accusation from the beginning of the book. Job and his friends basically turn that around and say, well, it's not wrong for the righteous to prosper, it's wrong for the righteous to suffer. At least this much, or at least more than the wicked, or something. They qualify it, but basically it's wrong for the righteous to suffer because that would mean God's not just. And so what Job and his friends want is they want to sit there as created, limited beings. They want to sit there and have some kind of concept of how this all makes sense. Some system of coherence so that they can see in real time, like live, why this suffering comes and why this suffering doesn't. Or at least in their lifetime, like maybe it's not right now, but at least before I die, this will all make sense. Job and his friends are pursuing that. We see this in their questions. They ask things like, well, why? The most basic question. What are they asking for? I want to know how this makes sense. I want to be able to grasp a full system of coherence. Why? And then they fill that out with, Job says, why did I suffer? In fact, Job takes that a little further and says, why was I even born? But that question is crying out, help this make sense. Job doesn't use these words, but if we summarize, he says basically, is God really for me? Or is he my enemy? He wants a way to make sense of it. In his mind, he's like, well, if God was just my enemy, at least this would make sense. Do the wicked prosper? That's another question they raise. Why do they care about that? Because they want it to make sense in their head. They want this system of coherence. Does God truly forgive? And they have worked out a theological plan, a way of understanding righteousness and wickedness and God. They've worked it out in a way that they think they've got a nice coherent system. And now this great big bomb has gone off right in the middle of it. Job's the best guy I know. Why is he suffering like that? And they're trying to figure out, how do I make this make sense? And the way that they make sense of it, which is basically, well, the righteous prosper, the wicked suffer, leads them to a number of bad conclusions. Like, Job, you must have done something really awful to suffer like this. But actually, you deserve worse. That's what they tell him. Or they come to the conclusion, God is such a hypercritical God who has such high standards that even if you come to him according to his word, you get judgment and disapproval. You might get forgiveness in the end, but you get judgment and suffering now because his standards are so high. Incidentally, that's really the same basic view of God that drives the idea of purgatory. There's not actual forgiveness. God's standards are so high that you still have to make something up. Job then says, well, I need to justify myself. Now, based on his system of how this all makes sense, that's logical for him. He says, look, the wicked should suffer, the righteous should prosper. It should be basically proportional. This isn't, because I suffer all this amount, and the wicked look like they have it pretty good. One of their conclusions they don't state, but you see it over and over in what they say, is that prosperity and comfort are the greatest reward and the worst possible loss. Now, that's not true, but that is the conclusion that their system of thinking, their way of making sense of what they observe, has led them to that conclusion. It's led them to the conclusion that God is distant, impersonal, and uncaring. If we were to really summarize their conclusions from chapter 4, 3 through 27, those are the big points of their conclusions. And their scheme for making sense, or their scheme of coherence, if you will, has led them to that mountain of conclusions that vary from either just incorrect or ungracious to Job or evil. I want you to make a crucial distinction here. I said their scheme of coherence led them to those conclusions, not their circumstances led them to their conclusions. They did not conclude what they concluded merely because Job suffered. They concluded these things because Job suffered, and they interpreted it a certain way based on what they said would make sense. In some ways, this is probably the most subtle and deceitful type of pride. They assume that their interpretation of the circumstances and their way of making sense of everything must be right. That's pride. The way I view it must be right. Their pride, when mixed with their circumstances, means they remake God according to their understanding. Throughout the book, that's what they've wanted. Make sense of this. They have a way they thought did, and it's led them to conclusions that were wrong, that were evil. And so we get to Job chapter 28. Before we look at that text, let's pray and ask God for his help. God, you are good. You've given us your word, your truth. We come before you with our desires to make sense of the things that we see. And we confess that we often look to ourselves. We often trust in our own understanding. We often lean on wisdom that is from earth, not wisdom that is from above. And to our shame, sometimes we conclude the same kinds of things that Job and his friends concluded about you. May we not do that today. Would you use these words that you have inspired in Job? Would you use our thoughts? Would you work by your Spirit to convict us of sin, to lead us to righteousness? I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Job 28, Job begins and he cries out, talking about treasure. Surely there is a mine for silver and a place for gold that they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth and copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches out to the farthest limit the ore in gloom and deep darkness. He opens shafts in a valley away from where anyone lives. They are forgotten by travelers. They hang in the air, far away from mankind. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, out of it comes bread, but underneath it is turned up as by fire. Its stones are the place of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. That path no bird of prey knows, and the falcon's eye has not seen it. The proud beasts have not trodden it. The lion has not passed over it. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings out to light. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Job uses this example of treasure, of mining. And he gives several different characteristics of treasure, maybe 3 that you could see here if you look at really all of it, but verse 3 and 4, treasure is hard to find. We know that. If you wanted to find the things he describes, Find the ore that you get silver and gold and iron and copper. You don't just go in your backyard with a little garden shovel and go, oh, there's gold, usually. If you do, let me know. That'd be a great story. It's hard to find. You go into a mine, it's not like you think that's an easy career path. I'm going to be a gold miner. Right? It's difficult. Treasure's difficult to find. Once you do find it, treasure is hard to retrieve. Even if you know it's there, you still look and say, well, I have to mine it out, and then it's in ore or it's in stone, and it has to be pulled out of that in order to be truly valuable. It's hard to find, it's hard to retrieve when you do find it, and it's difficult to refine. Gold in its natural, impure state is not really that valuable. You have to put effort into refining it. So he starts with this is what treasure is. Then he says, well, who finds treasure? Notice over and over. He says, here's what humans do. Verse 3, man puts an end to darkness and searches out to the farthest limit. And Job had only seen a fraction of that, right? Think of how many places we have gone and dug now that people in Job's time had never touched. They never thought about. Think of the way we go into mines or the ocean or space. And we do so in search of where is treasure. Job says, humans go all over this planet. They overturn mountains by the roots. They cut out channels in the rocks. If it's underneath the streams, it's not hidden because they put dams and they figure it out. Humans know how to look for this kind of treasure, even though it's hard to find, it's hard to retrieve once you do find it, and it's hard to refine once you find it. Humans know how to do it and tirelessly, over and over, seek it out. Where is it found? Well, he gives the example in verse 5, out of the earth comes bread. And it really captures his whole picture. It's found in mountains, it's found in streams, it's found in rocks, it's found in the earth. We know the big category. It's found in creation. We know who finds it, humans. We know how they find it through hard work and creativity and pursuing it over and over and over and over. But then he turns and says, but where shall wisdom be found? Where is the place of understanding? Now there's something here that's in the Hebrew that's harder to spot here. You can see it a little bit in English. But he actually calls it the wisdom. He puts the article in front of the word wisdom. And we don't always use it this way, but the way they do it, when they put the article, he's abstracting it. Like he's taking it and saying, let's look at wisdom over here, like it's a treasure. There's a reason he does that here. He says, look, where is the wisdom found? The gold, it's found in these kinds of places. The silver, it's found in these kind of places. He's not talking about, well, where does this particular nugget of gold, where is that found? He's just saying, in general, gold as a concept is found in mines, in mountains. Now, wisdom, where is that found? Where's the place of understanding? Now, he makes that transition because wisdom is like treasure. The three things I said a while ago could all apply to wisdom. Wisdom is hard to find. Say that's probably true. Especially, remember what we've talked about throughout the book. They've spent 24 chapters trying to find some kind of system of understanding, some kind of wisdom. Some kind of coherence to make it all make sense for them. Well, here, these guys were smart, and they've wrestled for chapter after chapter after chapter, and Job says, I can't find it. Where is wisdom to be found? Well, it's hard to find. Wisdom is hard to retrieve even if you know where to look. Have you ever had times when you think, I really know the wise thing to do, and I really don't want to follow it? I've been there. Because it's hard, even if you know where to look. Without jumping ahead too much, we know wisdom is found in God's word, and how many times do I want wisdom but really want to find it somewhere else? Wisdom is also difficult to refine. We use a word like nuance, right? When you have a right idea and you say, well, but do I really understand the details of how this idea should be applied into my life? Well, it takes nuance, refining. It takes, like Hebrews says, having our discernment strengthened by practice. Wisdom, just like treasure, is those same things. It's hard to find. It's difficult to retrieve even if you know where to get it in some cases. And you have to refine it, and that takes work. So then who finds it? Continue on in verse 13. Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. Well, it's not humans like the others. The others are found because man knows gold is valuable, so therefore man goes to the limits of darkness. Man dams up streams and goes down into the mines because gold is valuable. Humans don't do that to just find dirt because it's not valuable. And so he says, well, who's going to find wisdom? Well, not humans, apparently, because they don't even realize how valuable it is. All that treasure is found in the earth. Where is wisdom found? It is not found in the land of the living. The deep, the ocean, says, it is not in me. And the sea says, it is not with me. Well, if I don't know where to find it, maybe I can mine really valuable things like gold and then buy wisdom. Verse 15, it cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, that was especially valuable pure gold in their world, in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of crystal. The price of wisdom is above pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. From where then does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? He says, humans won't find it because they don't know it's valuable. They don't recognize it when they see it, and they don't see its worth. And we don't have a place to go look for it. It's not found in creation. It's not found in the ocean. It's not found in the deep. And we can't buy it with something that we can find in the ocean or in the mines. And so he gets to verse 20. Compare verse 20 and verse 12. The first one, verse 12, says, where shall wisdom be found? Verse 20 says, from where then does wisdom come? He's shifting his emphasis to say, at first, well, who can go find it in the depths of the mines? Nobody. But there has to be some way of making sense of this world, so where does it come from? If I can't go find it somewhere and I can't go dig it up, but it exists, well, where does it come from anyway? He says it is hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and Death say, we have heard a rumor of it with our ears. He says, you can't find this. But it exists. It comes from somewhere. Why does death have a hint of it? Does that strike you? It struck me as odd. Here he is going through saying, I can't find wisdom. I can't find wisdom. It's not in the land of the living, but there's a rumor of it in death. There's something that almost makes sense in death. And if you think about what he and his friends have been looking for throughout the book and the way about specifically in the last 10 chapters or so, they've talked about the wicked and their prosperity. His friends and Job want to know, how do I make sense of suffering specifically? And one of the conclusions that they have come to, Job has come to, I would say, is that the wicked ultimately do die. And he's expressed hope for the righteous in death. Remember back in chapter 14, he says, I wish I would die, not so that I could just be done with this, but because I know then, because my relationship with God is right, I know it's right. So he says, I wish I would die so that I could enjoy that relationship with God as it should be. Or we get to chapter 19 and he says, I know that my Redeemer lives and I will see him. So he's already gotten to the point of saying the righteous person has some hope, even through death, maybe even specifically through death. And he's also said the wicked person, even if they prosper all the way up to their death, they still face death, but without the hope. So you see why he gets here. He says, I can't make sense of all of this, but maybe there's a little hint of how to make sense of it in death and resurrection for the righteous. Now, I'll say more about this in a minute, but I want you to think about this. There's a couple different ways people will interpret Job, and sometimes it really comes down to what you've heard before and what you've read as you go through. Does Job start from a really good place, Job the person? Does he start from a really good place and get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until God finally shows up? Or does he start from a place of, I don't really understand, I don't know what's going on, and despite some ups and downs, he gains some good conclusions along the way? I think it's that one. And the reason I think it's that one is because at the end, when God shows up, God looks at his friends and says, you guys have said all kinds of bad stuff. You have not said what's right about me like my servant Job has. That does not sound to me like, Job, you kept getting worse and worse, and I finally had to straighten you out. At the end of it, God shows up. Job has had some things wrong. Job admits that. But I think Job has been arriving at good conclusions along the way. Not all of them, but some of them. I'll summarize that in a minute. But here, I think that's the path that Job is taking. He says, treasure is like this. We've been searching for wisdom. But where can I find wisdom? I can't. Eliphaz, Bildad, you can't. Humans can't find it. But it does exist. So where does it come from? Well, I've seen a hint of it as we've talked about death. We get to verse 23. God understands the way to it. God knows wisdom. He knows its place, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he gave to the wind its weight and apportioned the waters by measure, when he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder, then he saw it, wisdom, and declared it. He established it and searched it out. And he said to man, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. Now, when you get here, down to verse 28, the word wisdom doesn't have the article in front of it. Before that, remember, he's looking at, where can I find wisdom out here, something I can deal with, an abstract concept of wisdom that I can get. Now he gets here, and when he changes and speaks of it from God's perspective, it's not an abstract concept, it's actually knowledge of God himself. Job is maybe not entirely there yet, but Job is moving from, I need this wisdom out here so I can control life, to actually what I need is not wisdom in a box over here that I can use, but God. He's getting there. When he says God knows this place, notice verse 24, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. Job's recognizing something. If you're going to have real wisdom, like I said at the beginning, a system of making sense of everything. That's not always the way wisdom is used in Scripture. That word is used differently, but what Job and his friends have been searching for is a system of understanding. He said, in order to understand and make sense of everything, you have to know everything. He says that's why God understands wisdom. He knows its place because he looks out everywhere and he sees it all. His example, wind or waters. If you're here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and a breeze of wind blows across, unless you're a real weather junkie, you probably don't really know, like, how does that wind fit with broader patterns? I don't. I just know it blew on me. When you learn about wind and you say, look at all of the way these air patterns and this jet stream, they all fit together in a way that I would never know by watching breeze blow that tree. What would you have to have in order to coherently understand why all of the breezes of wind flow throughout our world? Omniscience, all knowledge. You'd have to know every piece of them and how they all interact. Not only that, but all the consequences of this wind or this hurricane blew here and that resulted in this over here. People will talk about the butterfly effect. Like a butterfly flaps its wings around the world and it ends up with a thunderstorm over here or something like that. I don't know how true that is. But the point is, what happens over in the winds of India is not disconnected from what happens in the winds of Knoxville. So to really understand every piece of it together, you'd have to know every piece of it. God understands the way to wisdom. He knows its place because he does know every piece of the system. To use a specific example from Job, Job and his friends knew their experience. God knew his conversation with Satan. And everything else. But that's one example. Wisdom, then, and this is Job as he's coming to this conclusion, wisdom is inaccessible without God. Humans cannot find wisdom without, at the very least, an all-knowing God. Now, I said before, I want to say again so it doesn't sound like I'm saying the wrong thing. I don't mean humans can't come up with good ways to live. Of course. We can all know wisdom says don't hit yourself with the hammer. It doesn't take a rocket science. You don't have to know everything to know that hurts. But to do what Job and his friends have been looking for, which is often what I want when I say wisdom. I say, I just want wisdom. I mean, I want to know how to work out every little piece of my life so that it turns out the way I want it to. That's not asking for don't hit yourself with the hammer. That's asking for a system of coherence that I can understand, some way to make it all make sense. That's not accessible without God. But his wisdom is displayed in his creation. So what does man need to know? Well, you get to the statement in verse 28. And he, that's God, said to man, to humans, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. I want to give you a couple illustrations of the fear of the Lord. I'll say up front, they're all not perfect. There's no perfect way to say, like, every piece of this works. But here's some ideas. When I first married my wife, I was blown away by how awesome she is. I still am, by the way. I thought, she's amazing. She's beautiful. She's godly. She wants to serve God. She's willing to turn away from other things to follow after him. We have similar interests. There's so many things you go, there's so much there. Now, that also meant I was turned away from other women. I couldn't say, like, yes, I really just love my wife so much, and I also want to pursue all these other relationships. No, that's not going to work out. Why? It's not because I'm afraid of my wife hurting me, although she might. But it's not because of that, really. It's because I was afraid of anything that would harm that relationship and hurt my ability to enjoy being related to her. What about a child of a policeman? Do they stay away from gangs and street drugs because they're afraid dad will come and arrest them? Maybe. But that's not what he wants, right? He wants them to be afraid of what would harm them. He wants them to be afraid of what would dishonor their father. That's really a fear, and he wants that fear. How about when you tell a child or an adult to wash your hands or you will get sick? Do I tell my kids that because I want them to be afraid of me? No. But getting sick is harmful to you. I do want to give you the right kind of fear, to give you fear of the right thing. Or a couple weeks ago, my family and I went out to Pickett State Park. And while we were there, we went to Hazard Cave, which is this giant cave, and it's very open, and somebody like me who doesn't like caves can still go in it, and that's good. Well, some of my kids and I crawled out on this rock ledge, which was about maybe this wide. Crawled out on this rock ledge, got to a certain point, and then army crawled underneath a rock outcropping. There was a little hole in between because you could crawl out and then you could just look down into the cave from actually up on the rock ledge. It's pretty cool. Now, before I did that, I warned my boys quite sternly that there was something to be afraid of here. This rock ledge is probably 25, 30 feet off the ground, and there's rocks down there. I want them to know if you fall off, you will probably, at least possibly, die, and definitely get hurt. I told them that sternly and seriously. Did I do that because I wanted them to be afraid, like to dread me? No. I want them to be afraid of the right thing. Not only that, though, I said it that way and I communicated it to them because I do want them to have a certain awe of my knowledge. Right? Not to lift me up, but I want them to see, I don't want them to think like, well, you know, a 6-year-old comes up and tells me you should be afraid of something. I hope their response is different when I tell them. Because I want them to know I know something more than you. I'm aware of the way this works, and I know you fall and it's going to be bad. I want them to have a certain relationship to me, and I want them to have the right kind of fear of the right things. And I'm doing that to protect them. One more illustration. A child goes to the ocean for the first time. Not a real little child, okay? Elementary school. And they're about to go out in the waves with their parent. The parent says, there's some dangers here. The parent says, you need a right respect of the ocean. Again, we want our child to have a certain amount of awe of us. We know these things, and we know how to stay safe. We also want them to have a healthy fear of the dangers. Why do we do all that? Because the fear of the ocean allows you to enjoy the ocean. If they don't have a healthy fear of the ocean, they will never enjoy it because they'll get hurt. They'll be swept away. But a right fear of the ocean allows you to enjoy the ocean. In a similar way, the fear of God allows you to enjoy God. Now, the illustration, they all break down because in the last illustration, God is both the ocean and the parent. And we can't grasp that entirely. But what is the fear of the Lord? It is two things. It is both an overwhelming response to God's attributes. He is this powerful and this all-knowing. And that's incredible. And there's a trembling when you see God for who he is. As Job is starting to do here, when he says, every breeze of the wind works together in his knowledge in a way that I could never comprehend. There's an overwhelmed response to God. And there's a dread that he gives you of all the things that would come in between you and him. When we say the fear of the Lord, I think sometimes we miss the fact that could mean I see him as a person and I am scared of him. That's not what any of those illustrations were. Now, he is powerful, righteous. Someone who does not come to him in faith should be scared. But the fear of the Lord doesn't just mean, here's the person, I am dreading him. When you use this word of, fear of the Lord, that can mean dreading him, or it's the fear that comes from him. It's the right fear that God gives. God does keep you in part because he gives you a fear that says, Jesus is so wonderful. I would hate to treat him like trash. You only have that fear if it comes from God. It is part of the fear of the Lord, the fear that belongs to him that he gives. And if you look at the parallelism of this text, I think you'll see one reason why that's true. Verse 28 says, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, to turn away from evil is understanding. So wisdom and understanding are very similar. Fear of the Lord and turning away from evil are very similar. Well, so why? Does that mean you turn away from evil because you're afraid of what God will do to you? No, in fact, that would defeat the whole purpose of the first 27 chapters of Job, where he's been saying, wicked people don't always suffer. So why is it that the fear of the Lord and turning away from evil are related? Because the fear that God gives you is both a respect and an acknowledgement and a worship, an overwhelmed trembling at how great he is. It's that, but it's also a fear that says, these evil things will hurt me. Think about Peter. He says, abstain from the passions of the flesh that wage war against your souls. Why does he say it that way? Because you should be afraid of the things that will hurt your soul. You only have that if God gives you that fear that you understand this will harm me. Why does he say Satan is a roaring lion waiting to bite and devour? It's all this fear language. And yet he says, don't fear him. We'll say, what's up with that? Be afraid of something that's going to harm your soul or be an obstacle to you enjoying and knowing God. Fear that, which means it's not a fear that chases me to run away from God. It's a fear that drives me to him. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and to turn away from evil. You turn away from it because he gives you fear of the right things. The fear of the Lord is like standing at the edge of God's infinite character and realizing the wonder of knowing him, the responsibility of knowing him, the value of knowing him, and realizing the fear that he gives you of anything that would stand in the way of you knowing him. Now, throughout the book, I said Job's been arriving at some good conclusions. I want to summarize a few. Chapter 14, he says, even if God is harshly critical of me, he's still my only hope. That's a good conclusion. God is not harshly critical of him, but even if he were, he can be trusted. Chapter 19, I can't justify myself. I need a redeemer to do that. That's a good conclusion. He doesn't know how all that works out. He's fighting back and forth. He has despair. There's encouragement in that for you and I, that there are times you're coming to good, right conclusions and you still feel like it just drives you to despair sometimes, and you go, I don't know, maybe that conclusion wasn't right at all. No, Job's getting the right thing piece by piece by piece. In chapter 24 and 27, Job has concluded, if the wicked can prosper for a time, then maybe the righteous can suffer for a time. And yet God still work it all together in his wisdom. He's gotten to that conclusion, and he gets here and he realizes wisdom is not a system of my understanding that makes sense and gives me coherence for everything. That's not what wisdom is. Job concludes then, I don't need the wisdom, I need the one who is wisdom. I don't need my own system of understanding to make sense of all of it. I need trust and knowledge of the God who does make sense of all of it. And only God could really have that wisdom anyway, because you have to know everything to know how it all makes sense together. That's why he says, for he knows, he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. See, what Job and his friends have been doing is they've really been putting themselves in God's place. I want to know how it all works out and how it all makes sense. And if I can just know that, then I'm okay. But as soon as you do that, what you're really doing is you're putting yourself in God's place, and you can't really understand who God is. Once you put yourself in God's place, you don't really know him. Romans 1 talks about that. When you worship and serve the creature rather than the creator, you suppress the truth about who God is. See, we long for coherence that makes us feel safe. Well, the only thing that is going to give you real safety is knowing the God who holds everything together. And when he says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the right relationship to God, that's what Proverbs says. That's not what it says here. I was going to mention that actually. In Proverbs, he's talking about a different thing. He's saying, here's where it starts. Like, you've got to have the fear of the Lord to start. Job is getting to a different conclusion, a good one, not a contradictory one. He's saying, real wisdom is knowing God. And he's thinking about wisdom as a system of coherence, something that makes it all make sense. Proverbs is saying, when you start with knowing God, you can pursue a right understanding and skill in living day by day, which is good, but that's a different definition of wisdom. When he says the fear of the Lord is wisdom, they wanted a system that makes me feel safe. Job says, you're never getting that this way. The only way you can get it is to know God. But if you know God, then you have exactly what they were looking for in wisdom. You have safety knowing God is the one who holds all these things. They were looking for a way to explain their sufferings and their successes. No system of thinking and philosophy is going to get all of that. Job is saying, no, I need to know the God who knows those things. I need to fear the things he wants me to fear, and I need to love the things he wants me to love. I need to come to him in awe and wonder, which he will in a few chapters. Job says, that's what I need. That's what will help me. And it won't let me explain my successes and sufferings in a way that I can control. He's realizing that. Instead, I have to have a right relationship to God. See, there's a kind of wisdom, a kind of self-centered, this makes sense to me, that we all want to pursue. That's not real wisdom. And it will lead you exactly where Job and his friends ended up. It will lead you to incorrect, harmful, or even evil conclusions. But there's a different kind of wisdom. An understanding of the universe that God possesses because you know God. That kind of wisdom will not lead you to the conclusions of the first 27 chapters of Job. It will lead you to the kind of conclusion that Job reaches at the end, where he says, God, I've seen you. You are worthy. Whereas Paul, in 1 Corinthians 1, he talks about a wisdom that's from this earth. He talks about a foolishness that's actually wisdom. And he says, Jesus is made to us the wisdom of God, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption, so that no one might boast in the presence of God. Where we fail to make sense of everything in our heads, we can sit here and say, sufferings happen, successes happen. I don't know how it all works together, but we can say, because of Jesus, because of the righteousness that he gives, because of the redemption from slavery to sin that he gives, because of the growth in godliness that he gives, he is wisdom. He is the understanding that gives me safety, that lets me operate in this world not as if I control the outcome, but as if he does, because that's true. This week, as I was thinking through that, preparing this sermon, and thought about ending with that verse, God beautifully had Sovereign Grace Music put a YouTube video that dropped on Friday as I was writing that. The song's titled Christ, Our Wisdom. And it says there's 4 responses to knowing wisdom. So I'm going to let them make the application for me. Knowing his wisdom gives us humility. I can't find this wisdom on my own, but he has it. It gives us joy because all of the unknowns and uncertainties and worries, he works these things out. And he holds them. It gives us a motive to follow. We say, I want to follow you with everything because you know the path I should take far better than I do. And it leads us to praise. To say, God, you are the one who should be adored forever. In all of that, Job is realizing, you're God, and I'm not. And that's a good thing. And if we can say the same things, he is a good God, and we are not, and not, I really wish I was, but that's a good thing. We'll respond with the same worship and humility that Job had. I'll invite you to take a moment and pray, and then we'll sing together, Christ our wisdom.